unique pupil, Varesa will be the one new 5-star character releasing in patch 5.5. Based on her initial beta kit, Varesa is looking to be another solid not-LAN DPS being added to the roster who is very mobile in combat despite her laid-back appearance and love for food, and she just might be the next best Electro main DPS that Genshin has to offer. To see how good Varesa is looking at the moment, let's discuss the details of her initial beta kit. As always, remember that this is very early information, so very subject to change. Varesa is a 5-star Electro Catalyst user that ascends with crit rate. She is designed to be not-LAN's first Electro main DPS that focuses on plunge damage. All her abilities help enable the plunge playstyle, with both her skill and burst having cooldown resets to facilitate more plunge damage. You can imagine Varesa as the 5-star Electro version of Gaming, but without the gameplay awkwardness that Gaming has with having to catch his lion to reset his skill. Varesa may just have the most convoluted kit description of any character I've ever seen in Genshin, as you need info from all 3 of her talents together to piece out how Varesa will play. However, once Varesa's kit is broken down, it is much simpler to understand than it might seem. In order for Varesa to go up into the air and plunge on her own, she needs to use her charged attack. Once in the air, she can do a normal plunge, and once her plunge hits an enemy, Varesa will gain 25 Nitzel points. However, if you played Hu Tao, you'll know that charged attacking takes stamina, which becomes a limited resource. Because of this, Varesa doesn't use her normal charged attack but relies on her elemental skill, which has 2 charges. When held, she'll run super fast for overworld exploration. When pressed, Varesa dashes forward to deal damage, gains 20 Nitzel points and resistance to interruption, and allows her next normal attack to become a charged attack that doesn't consume stamina. So one standard Varesa plunge will consist of skill, pressing normal attack to perform a charged attack, and the actual plunge attack. This order of abilities will give Varesa 45 Nitzel points, and the max she can hold is 40. When Varesa has full Nitzel points, she will enter Nitzel's Blessing and go into the Fiery Passion state. This enhanced state will give Varesa another usage of her skill and increases the damage of all her abilities. With the damage buff and extra skill usage, Varesa will want to do another plunge with skill, charge attack, plunge attack. Once Varesa performs this enhanced plunge attack, she will consume all her Nitzel points and exit her Fiery Passion state. After doing this, Varesa will enter yet another enhanced state called Apex Drive. This gives her interruption resistance and access to a special version of her burst. Normally, Varesa's burst costs 70 energy with an 18-second cooldown, has the typical burst animation that all characters have, and it deals damage, more if she's in Fiery Passion. However, the special burst that Varesa can use costs 30 energy and has its cooldown reset whenever Varesa enters Apex Drive. However, it is just another AoE damage instance without the usual burst animation. Thus, the overall gameplay loop of Varesa's kit is as follows. After setting up your support skills and you switch to Varesa, you'll use her skill, charged attack, and plunge to completely fill up Varesa's Nitzel gauge. This will make Varesa enter Fiery Passion and enhance the damage of her next set of skill, charged attack, and plunge combo. After this, Varesa will consume all her Nitzel points but will enter Apex Drive, allowing you to use the lower energy cost version of her elemental burst. Then you'll redo this same attack chain of unbuff plunge, buff plunge, into special burst a second time before looping back to your supports. For some teams, you may be able to fit in another unbuff skill, charged attack, plunge combo before switching back to your supports. Remember that every charged attack is just activated by pressing normal attack because you use Varesa's skill right beforehand. So even though the kit description is very confusing with multiple names of enhanced states, the actual buttons you need to press is straightforward and flows well. Lastly, both of Varesa's combat passives simply buff her damage. Her A1 increases the damage of one plunge attack after using her skill more while she's in the Fiery Passion state, and her A4 passive gives Varesa attack whenever Nitzel Burst is triggered up to 60% attack. That's everything on Varesa's base kit. Varesa does use every single ability to deal damage. Looking at the current multipliers of all her talents, her talent leveling priority at the current moment is normals first, then burst, then skill. Next, let's cover Varesa's initial beta constellations. Varesa's C1 makes her A1 passive always give 50% damage bonus to her plunges rather than alternate between 25% and 50%. In addition, it gives Varesa 25% attack when she enters the Fiery Passion state and increases the duration of her overworld mobility. C2 makes it so that Varesa can use her special lower energy cost burst after every plunge attack she does. So instead of her typical attack combo of unbuff skill charge attack plunge, buff skill charge attack plunge, and then special burst, with C2 you can always use the special burst after each skill charge attack plunge combo, whether it is buffed by the Fiery Passion state or not. C2 also gives Varesa energy after she does a plunge attack to help her have enough energy to use all these bursts. C3 increases her burst talent level by 3. With C4, if Varesa uses her normal burst that has the animation, longer cooldown, and larger energy cost, she will greatly buff the damage of her next normal plunge attack. If she uses the special version with a lower energy cost and resetting cooldown, it will deal increased damage. C5 increases her normal talent level by 3, and lastly, C6 gives gives 30 energy to Varesa when she enters Apex Drive, which likely allows you to actually use her regular burst in rotation, and 10 crit rate and 100 crit damage to her plunging attacks and burst. It also gives you an even longer duration of overworld mobility. Overall, Varesa's constellations are actually looking not that strong at the moment. Hoyoverse has recently liked to make C1, C2, or both C1 and C2 very strong constellations that increase the character's damage a lot to get you to pull more copies, especially for many of the recent Fontaine and Knotline characters. Varesa's constellations currently don't buff her damage to this extent. C1 only gives buffs to some of her existing plunges, and while C2 does give you extra burst cast, this also increases her rotation length, which counteracts some of the damage gain. Because of this, I do think Varesa's constellations will be buffed in the upcoming weeks. Next, let's go over Varesa's potential build options. Her signature weapon will be her clear best in slot. High base attack, crit damage substat, and the special passive gives her even more attack and even more crit damage to Varesa's plunging attacks. Two other 5-star weapons that look good on Varesa include Kagura's Verity and Lost Prayers. You can also use Skyward Atlas and Shen Yun's signature, however these two 5-star options look a bit worse than the first two I mentioned. For 4-star weapons, the best looking one currently is the Witsith, as the crit damage substat is valuable and 2 out of the 3 buffs from his passives are very good on Varesa, the attack and elemental damage. You will want to hope to avoid the elemental mastery buff, though it is not completely useless, especially if you're running Dendro related teams. For a free to play weapon option, the best looking one currently is the Fontaine craftable Floating Purity. For artifacts, patch 5.5 is releasing new Knotline artifacts, and Long Night's Oath, a plunging focused set, is made for Varesa's kit. Because Varesa uses her elemental skill, charged attack, and plunge attack all together, she easily stacks the 4-piece effect, and this artifact will give a total of 100% plunging attack damage bonus for Varesa. However, even though most of Varesa's damage is plunge damage, she does still do some damage with her elemental skills and charge attacks, which won't get buffed by this artifact set. Because of this, 4-piece Obsidian Codex is actually very similar in performance, even though the 2-piece won't have good uptime as Varesa constantly enters and exits Nightsoul's Blessing. She'll be able to maintain the crit rate after her second plunge, and both the damage bonus and crit rate buffs all her damage compared to only her plunge attacks. However, I do expect changes in the upcoming weeks that will make the new plunge artifact set the more preferable choice. For artifact stats, Varesa is your typical attack scaling carry, so attack hourglass, electro damage or attack goblet, and crit circlet, with all the usual substats to look for such as ER and TOR requirements, which currently looks to be about 120 to 140 ER, crit, and attack percent. EM can be useful in Dendro teams, but you shouldn't prioritize it. Lastly, let's cover Varesa's potential team comps. As a plunge focused DPS, one obvious support to consider is Shen Yun, the premier plunge support and healer. Shen Yun is definitely one of Varesa's strong supports, however she has strong teams that don't use Shen Yun, so Varesa isn't completely reliant on her compared to other plunge DPSs like Xiao. The one support that Varesa does really want is INSANE, her coach, and the new 4-star Electro support releasing in the same patch. If you want more in-depth details on INSANE, be sure to check out my video analyzing her initial beta kit. To summarize, INSANE brings a lot of attack and damage bonus to the active character, similar to Bennett, but instead of being confined to a circle, INSANE wants movement to maximize her buffs. And since Varesa moves around a lot with her dashes and plunges, her kit perfectly synergizes with INSANE. Thus, all of Varesa's best teams will include INSANE. Varesa's current highest ceiling team in terms of damage is Chevreuse Overload. With C6 INSANE and C6 Chevreuse, Varesa's dashes and plunges will allow her to maintain full uptime of all of INSANE's buffs to deal high damage. And even without high constellations on the 4-star supports, this team should still perform solidly. Next, you can run an Electrocharge team with Farina as the Hydro that's focused on buffing Varesa's damage, using either Shen Yun or Shilonen as the final support slot. You can also decide to drop Farina and just run both Shen Yun and Shilonen for a mono Electro team buffing Varesa. In terms